Ramirez, and I'm an engineer at Avail. Has anyone heard of Avail before? Oh, sweet. We are a property management platform for do-it-yourself landlords and tenants. We provide tools, education, and support for landlords to make renting easier. We were previously Rentolutions. Has anyone ever heard of Rentolutions? Oh, sweet. More people who also work at Avail now. Cool. All right, early stage, right? A little bit about me. I'm an engineer by trade, but also by hobby. I am more of a config junkie. In my mind, the best way to spend a Saturday night is at my apartment with my laptop and trying to figure out the next best config for a React app or a Rails app. It's one of the greater joys in my life to do this, believe it or not. That's why I'm forced. Yeah, I'm really happy, really excited to be here today. This office is immaculate. I can't believe it. This is like Stop Hero. These guys have 2 fridges, right? They're funded, right? This whole place is like unbelievable. Except for the alley outside. I was in there practicing what I was going to say earlier for about 30 minutes in front of this event, and now I smell like a French fry. So got that going for me. What I'm going to talk about today is the most powerful tool in our stack called ReactiveRecord. I happen to have written it myself. It's something that was born in production. It's something that has changed the way that we interact with JSON APIs in our stack. And I'm hoping that you guys will be excited about it and see that it can benefit your stack as well. It's something we've been using for about a year now. A little bit of backstory. 2 years ago, Rentolutions, now Avail, was a page refreshing application, and we decided to adopt React into our build. We shopped around for a couple different frameworks. We're like, okay, if we're going to build a single page application, what are you going to use? What were the options at that time? It was Angular. There was pretty much just Angular and React were the 2 viable options to go with. With React, it was more of a sexy framework, so kind of number 1. But we were shocked by the number of tools that was required for us to adopt and learn right away before we could even start getting React and transfer JSX and get it onto the page in HTML. There's just a lot of tools and stuff. And coming from a Ruby on Rails background, there wasn't a lot of opinions about what you should be doing. If you look online for a React tutorial, how to set stuff up, there was different tutorials available for you to look at. How to implement the first React app. Not really a resounding thing. How many of us are Rails users here? So if you start with Rails, there's no questions, right? There's always exactly how to do something with everything you're doing. The Flux architecture, familiar with it? So the whole idea that you are dispatching events from the top of your app down to the bottom, that was designed really well for us. If you look up Flux, one of the most popular libraries for it is Redux. So you're probably using Redux if you're using the React app. And you have to create actions, reducers, you have to write, mapStateToProps, mapStateToProps, and all this stuff over and over again. It tends to be really repetitive. And it's something we weren't really willing to accept at Rentolutions at the time. It's a lot of repetitive code. To be honest, ever since we implemented ReactiveRecord, I can't remember the last time I wrote a mapStateToProps function or wrote an actions or reducers file. How many of us write those on a daily basis? So yeah, quite a bit of us are used to writing these things. We don't do it anymore because we're really managing our UI with regular component state, and then when it comes to data being put on the page, we manage it with ReactiveRecord. It's a pretty simple process. So I hope that you guys are excited to see ReactiveRecord throughout, and then we'll be demoing the code first. And I want to first talk about the decisions that led to us to actually build ReactiveRecord, the things that we learned along the way. In order to fully appreciate ReactiveRecord, you have to be familiar with the concept of REST and RESTful architecture. So who here has heard of REST before? The concept of REST. Great. So almost everyone. That's awesome. So we're probably not all just strictly front-end engineers here, right? Some of us are full stack. Is that correct? Yeah. So some of us would be cool. The concept of REST, I'm really a little bit familiar with that. And then I want to talk about things that we at Avail think of on a daily basis and the things that have made us better engineers, lessons that we've learned along the way. First lesson is don't build a website, build a service, right? So what do we mean by service? A service could be something as simple as an API. How many of us have used Shopify before? When you sign up for Shopify, one of the first things you have to do is to create a online storefront, right? So like, and they call this a strategy. So the front end online storefront is by no means your product or your business. It's just a strategy for the service. The service for them is an e-commerce, e-commerce store. Different strategies that they have available for you. Well, you have your online e-com store, you have your point of sale device, you have an iOS app, an Android app. These are just strategies that you enable your service, right? So you fundamentally have an API backend that's responding to GET, POST, PUT requests, that's creating resources, and you have these different strategies that implement that service, right? So we're all kind of good on that. So if you set out to build a website, and like, I guess just to kind of rewind back to where we were at Red Solutions 2 years ago, the front end that we built was tightly coupled to the back end, right? So there's no concept. I guess when you're building a React app, you're building a API along with, or there's either an existing API or you're building an API along with your React app, right? So with us, it was more like every single front end not directed to a service on the back end, right? So it was a very tightly coupled page refreshing app. Nothing single page application about it. So in order for us to start using ReactiveRecord, start using React, we had to basically make a feature-within version of our entire service via JSON. If you guys are into a similar thing, is anyone actually building APIs? We're all kind of front page. Building APIs, a lot of this is cool. So build a service, right? And then when you build a service, you enable yourself to have more strategies associated with that service, rather than having a service be tightly coupled with your front end. Okay, so don't build a website, build a service. Second lesson is don't build from scratch, right? How many of us have thought to ourselves that we can how many of us have built a mobile component before? Some of us, right? Some of us, I have, I certainly have. Like I said, I'm a big fit junkie. Avoid building things from scratch, right? Because there's a lot of tools out there, probably a lot of people coming from a Rails background. Every business problem that you run into, there's likely a solution with ready to go code ready for you to use, right? So you can focus on your business logic rather than starting to build things from scratch, right? So that's the goal, is that you're not building things from scratch. And likely, people that are building these tools have, they're full-time thinking about the problem, so they're full-time making solutions for it. We all use React as a framework. So if you're starting a new company, you have like a team of 7 React experts who wrote React attribute kits, right? So you're just expanding the developer team by adopting a framework like React. Same is true of Rails. You have a worldwide team of world-class developers ready to help you build your application with you, and you don't have to do anything. So don't build things from scratch, avoid it. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, it may be built already, but I can probably build it better, right? So that means it's our third rule. Don't build it yourself, even if you can build it better, right? It's a very important concept to learn, something that I'm still trying to learn. Because I built a library like ReactiveRecord. But the reason that ReactiveRecord exists today is because there was nothing for it, right? And I'm part of giving this talk at React Chicago because I'm looking for someone to interrupt me and say, oh, well, you just basically cloned this library that Kyle's never heard of before, but you built it. So I'm waiting for someone to jump out and say, oh, this library already exists. But we did a lot of work to make sure that it didn't exist, right? So we looked and saw, is a wrapper for all of JSON requests? Like, how are you supposed to manage state within your React app? The tutorials that you find that you're supposed to be writing users and actions and all this other stuff to get data on the page. What are some tools that we use for that? We use Fetch. Anyone use Axios? What about regular like jQuery, XHR? Anybody use anything different than that? Those are just like how you interact with the JSON API. It's not, when it comes to actually where you put that, where you store your data and stuff like that, you're kind of on your own, right? There's really no solution for that. So if there was a solution out there, I think you'd be aware of it. The guy that works for a company, Asher, he basically gets a Google alert every time the NPM module is updated. So I'm sure that if there was a solution out there, we know about it right now. Okay, cool. What's in ReactiveRecord? Things that led us to build ReactiveRecord. The problems that we're actually trying to solve with this. The first one is, let me get back a little bit. That's fine. A model schema syntax like Mongoose. We already used Mongoose before in React. Okay, cool. So with Mongoose, it's cool because you can directly define your schema. In React, it's a little weird because if you're developing in React, you have no clue how many attributes are available to you. That's like problem number one. With Mongoose, we have a centralized definition of the model. You can list out the different attributes that belong to that model. Right? So now the React developer can go in and say, okay, reproduce all the attributes I have access to. It provides like a good documentation for what they are able to display. Save, update attribute syntax like active record. All of the engineers at Avail are full stack engineers, and so something like active record and their syntax like update attribute, update attributes, stuff like that, save, validate, false. Those are things we're really familiar with. So we need our tools to have something, a syntax similar to that, essentially just camel paste. Next thing is a locally synced copy to database like HouseDB. HouseDB, anybody? People use this before? Cool. We wanted, under the hood, ReactiveRecord is just a simply wrapper for Redux and an AJAX fetch library. So it does keep a local copy of the user's data in the browser and manage it for you. So as the user navigates around, they're able to kind of like, stay in sync, right? As information is updated. And the last thing is we wanted to give first-class citizen JSX, right? A lot of times, if you just want to get like your to-dos on the page, you have to write a mapStateToProps function. Then you have to dispatch the action whenever the component mounts. And then as you go, you have to map through the individual to-dos. Well, that's a lot of boilerplate we imagined, or we figured out. So we got rid of all of that instead of just one component to do that. And I'm going to show you guys how it works. So these are the things that is inside React. In order to build this, and like I was saying earlier, because we built a single-page application from scratch, we also had to build our JSON API from scratch. Right? So it required us to basically keep a very strict implementation of REST, because this is what ReactiveRecord expects. ReactiveRecord makes a few assumptions about the way your backend works, and it's basically as long as your backend adheres to REST, then it's going to work fine. Right? So which a lot of us, if you're interacting with JSON APIs, it's pretty much the way to do it. A lot of our resources map directly to database tables. Like for instance, we're a property management software, right? So we have units, we have leases, we have buildings. But some things don't map directly to database tables, right? Like a session. Like how many of us have built a login form before, right? So that doesn't, when the user signs up, that's easy. It maps directly to a database row, so a user is created. But when a session is created, what happens? Oftentimes it just puts a cookie on the user's machine, stores a user ID, and the session to identify the user, therefore, or henceforth as the current user, right? So we had to build an entire login system for API so that we could support this like a session user functionality in the current user component, which we'll talk about. So in order to achieve this, we're going to just do a quick review of REST. So how many of us again have used REST or are familiar with all the REST verbs? So who can tell me what REST is? What's REST?
It stands for representative state transfer, created by Roy Fielding. It was a PhD thesis.
And what is it?
It's a spec for HTTP that specifies what the verbs are and how they map to what they should do on the back end, so that you should have some expectation of.
Perfect. Good answer. Representational state transfer. Did you guys hear? So, okay, representational state transfer is essentially a series of verbs that describe how data is created, updated, read, and deleted. Right? The CRUD pattern. How you implement basically every single thing inside of an API. So you get these four verbs from REST. You get, post, put, and delete. And these things have been around since pretty much the dawn of the internet, right? Somehow that the internet gods, Roy Fieldings, other people were like, hey, everyone's doing the same thing here. All these servers should be able to talk to each other with these different verbs and respond with specific codes, like 201 created, making a post request, making a put request is going to do 202 accepted. So we're familiar with these things, especially if you've worked in getting data from your API. And this, like if you're writing a form, you oftentimes put the method post and then where the endpoint is. Right, so you're making requests on the collection of certain models, in this case to-dos. Just out of curiosity, this is a serious question. What libraries do you guys use to manage forms, like to submit forms inside of React? What are some examples? What's at our disposal? We have like Redux forms. What else? Is it all homegrown solutions? Who uses a homegrown solution? A couple of us. What are you willing to spit out what they actually use to submit forms? Nobody submits forms. All right, cool. Well, this will be a breeze, right? This will be the first. So before you get into submitting forms, you got to take a look at ReactiveRecord. We make it stupid simple. How does REST map to applications, right? So, okay, if you're a front-end developer, you often are making at least 4 different pages. These all usually don't map to pages directly. For instance, if you're creating a to-do, maybe they click on new to-do and a modal comes up, and that's the to-do/new, right? Something similar to that. And that's a form that allows you to create a to-do, in other words, make a post request to that item, right? The next thing is the show page and the edit page. So the show page is the page where you are showing the data, and the edit page is where you have another chance to edit that data again. ReactiveRecord and just building a React app in general gave us a lot of really good UX patterns. This little diagram here is kind of an example of what we do at Avail all the time. The user expects the save button to be at the bottom right-hand corner of the form, right? We pretty much all do that. It's a good UX practice. Having a library that basically assumes a lot about the way you design things forces you into these good UX practices. So that's another benefit that we have, in going through this. So all these things map together, result in these things called the 7 resourceful actions. So if you're familiar with Rails, you've seen this before. If you're building a routes file in Rails, you've likely done resources and then your model name globalized. And then that gives you these 7 actions here, which then you would create a controller that maps directly to actions and implements these things, right? So this is the idea of you don't get, who here uses Express? Anybody use Express? You don't get these things out of the box with Express, right? You kind of have to write it yourself from top to bottom, right? You have to write all the functions, and you have to extend routers and stuff like this. And with Rails, it kind of assumes that you're doing this already. This is the idea of an opinionated framework. So who can tell me what an opinionated framework is? What is that, or just opinionated in general? When we talk about libraries, what does opinionated mean?
It chooses for you.
It chooses for you, right? It saves the guesswork. It has an opinion about how you should be doing things, right? It saves a lot of guesswork so that you can focus on your business logic rather than focus on building something from scratch, right? So it's like you're kind of a sucker if you have to build the whole thing yourself. You're going to spend all your time reinventing the wheel when people have figured this stuff out already. That's why the 7 resourceful actions exist in Rails, because they know what you're about to do, and they say, an opinionated framework has a lot of opinions about what you ought to be doing with your application. It's like a religion, right? A religion will tell you what you ought to say, what you ought to think about, how you ought to act, and stuff like that. Opinionated framework is exactly the same. And in fact, people who use Rails and use opinionated frameworks tend to be pretty hardcore about those frameworks, right? They tend to agree with those opinions and then hold themselves to them. So kind of like a cult following, which I think is a good thing. So React's only opinion was Flux. It's the only thing they really told us to do out of the box and said, if you're going to be managing state in React, you ought to manage it from top down. And that was really the only opinion that they made available to us. From there, Dan Abramoff, you guys heard that guy talk? Sounds really weird. Dan Abramoff created Redux on his spare time, like he was in a hotel room, he wrote this thing, and I was like, his monumental library there. It's crazy. He built Redux for us, but he had this entire, you have to read the entire website just to start with. You have to read how to write a reducer, how to write actions, how to write mapStateToProps, mapStateToProps, and all this other stuff just to start using Redux. And then suddenly it makes sense. And you have to write all these connect functions, and then we learn about high-order components and how those work and all this stuff. So it becomes really complicated, really repetitive. So we thought we could do better. And we thought to ourselves, there's so many models out there. We have so many models in our own application. We have external APIs that we make requests to. It's like, what are we going to do? Is all these tutorials on Medium, all these tutorials that we find online, is that the only way? Or is that just what the beginners are doing? What are the actual pros doing? Right? So pros here to show you. With a demo. Okay, so I want to show you guys a few things about what you may be familiar with first. The first thing is what we're building. How many of us use Redux Dev Tools? I have this little guy right here. Anyone seen this before? Cool. You're all familiar with it? All right, I want you guys to keep an eye on the actions that are being dispatched right here. This OK to do's is a regular setup of a mapStateToProps and mapStateToProps. I wrote an actions file with the action OK to do's in it. And then inside of that, it maps it to the producer, and it's going to bring the to-dos back to the application where we get this nice list index of to-dos here. This is like the worst design thing ever. It's just a JSON object and it turns out. Yeah, so we got a new page, like I was saying earlier, how REST maps to different pages, the new page, right? And then we have the back to the index. If I want to create a to-do, there's something I should do. Oh man, looks like I got a couple here. From the front. Right, so I can create a to-do, and then if I look on the right-hand side, it's going to create, show, the to-do. These are reactive record actions. We'll get to that in a second. But after submitting the form, it takes me directly to the show page. So if you look at the URL, it's /to-do/ID. That's just like arbitrary, like UX practices. Like there's an edit page where I can go and update stuff. Save, go back to the index. So we're all familiar with this pattern. We've all done the basic CRUD pattern before and implement this kind of thing. It's the easiest thing you can do. And this is just one model to do. By the way, this is a reactive record sample output in Rails, so just curious. But let's actually look at the code, something that we're actually pretty familiar with here, right? So this is the actual list component, and this is the list that we're seeing now. It's indexing the to-dos. So we have mapStateToProps where we have a state that comes in and it selects from the state.to-do reducer.to-dos, and returns to-dos, so we get that as a prop in our component. We have the map dispatch to prop, which gets dispatched, and we have actions and we get to-dos, and we're going to pass dispatch into that because in the actions, it's going to get dispatched, and it's going to do window.fetch, blah, 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 OK to-dos when it has the to-dos. All right, so there's already two files that we're working in at this point. Two functions. Then we have our actual component, the list. When that component mounts, we're going to dispatch get to-dos, which we get from the map dispatch to props, right? That's passing it in. And then when we're in the component, we get the props to-dos because we passed it in from the mapStateToProps. And we're going to map through them. How many of us have written something similar to this before? Everybody, right? Very simple. Inside of it, we have a pre, and then we have a link to that to-do, and to-do name, and then we're basically just JSON stringifying the actual to-do itself. We've all read this before, and then we pass these mapStateToProps function and mapDispatchToProps function into the higher order component connect, and then we pass in our component into there, and now all of a sudden we have a fully implemented Redux, setup. Inside the actions, we went over that. Let's look at the reducer. We have the to-do reducer, which starts out with to-dos in an empty array. When it gets the action OK to-dos, it's going to assign that to the state. How many of us have written something like this similar before? Great. Cool. Then we have combined reducers, blah, blah, blah. Here's how ReactiveRecord is instantiated, by the way. I want to show you guys what is available with ReactiveRecord. And we'll start with this list component. And I want to show you guys where it starts. So we have in here the containers. I created a new top-level folder here called models. And this is what I was talking about with the Mongoose-style schemas. I have a model here called to-do. I import ReactiveRecord in model. And I have just one thing in here, a schema, which has a name as a string, description as a string. Whether it's done, it takes a default value. And then you just export to-do and add it to ReactiveRecord. And that's really all that's required. And then so developer comes in here, they see these different attributes available, and say, okay, cool. I have a name to work with, I have a description to work with, I have done, and I have timestamps. This is like a helper function in ReactiveRecord that as soon as you have the attributes created that and updated that. So you're back in the list component, and we're going to refactor this file for things and get rid of the things that we don't need in here and refactor it to work with ReactiveRecord. So we don't need these actions anymore, no actions. We don't need connect anymore. We don't need mapStateToProps. We don't need mapDispatchToProps. We don't need to be a class anymore, so we're going to remove this. We're going to remove the component in mount. We're going to stick to what we actually need, which is just this markup here, and stick it right here. Then I'm going to remove this render function, and I'm going to remove this export default for the connect function. So we're left with just this. So we do have to export this, so we do export default. Call that list. Which takes no props because it's an index and where you know where it's going to be from. So I'm going to return. So before I do that, I'm going to actually import this stuff. So import ReactiveRecord. Cool. All right. And I'm going to actually define that. I'm going to grab that model from ReactiveRecord, so const to do. ReactiveRecord.model.to-do. And then let's build that collection. This is who uses TextMate, by the way? Does anyone use TextMate? Who uses Adam? Who uses VS Code? Alright. It's a point of contention for us at the office, even with a team of like 4 engineers. Okay. Collection for to do, right? And that's really the only thing. And then we have, who here has heard of the function is child strategy, function is children before? We ever used that before? Okay, cool. So as soon as we have this, we're going to say the only argument is to do's, that's our list of to do's. We're going to return it. And now we're back with this block. We're going to grab that, put it in there. I feel like this is like one of those cooking shows. Like I'm not Martha Stewart, someone else. Cool. So now we're mapping to those to-dos. And so just with this syntax right here, we have a collection. Now let's look at what we want ReactiveRecord to do. Inside of, when we're talking about REST, there are two things, especially in Rails, two little words, collection and member. Who can tell me the difference between collection and member? Anybody?
Many or one.
What's that?
Many or one.
Many or one, right? So if it's an index, you're talking about a collection of items. If it's a show page, you're talking about a member of that collection, right? So if something is on the collection, that means it's going to be slash to-dos. So we expect ReactiveRecord, and we're going to take a look at network requests here, but we expect ReactiveRecord to be making a request automatically to to-dos. And again, the only configuration was just this to-do here, right? So ReactiveRecord is making a lot of assumptions about how our API is actually structured. So I'll save this and come back here, let it reload, and the exact same thing. So we have these two actions, index to do and OK index to do, which you can probably imagine one is getting it, one is receiving it, these two actions. And let's look at the network tab inside of to do. So the first thing we did is we made an API request to to-dos right here, and the get was 200 OK, returned in an array. Can you guys see this? Yeah, so it returns an array of those individual to-dos, which ReactiveRecord gives right back to us. Right, so very cool. All the other components in here that ReactiveRecord makes available are used here. And those are we have the collection component, which renders a collection, the member component, which renders a single element, so that we can see that member for to-do. And then there's the form component, actually member for to do, and then it's like find, this.props that ID or whatever that is using the browser. And then you have your form component, which if you've ever used the Ruby on Rails form, it's exactly the same stuff. So form for new to do, and then that's pretty much it. And you get your fields object from there. Okay, cool. And the other thing I wanted to show you guys is that the things that's returned from this, so there's a lot of magic happening here, right? A lot of that's not being explained. These to-dos that are coming, that we're mapping through here, are fully instantiated ReactiveRecord models. So on this page right here, talk at React Chicago, talk about REST. I want to add some more functionality in here. So what I'm going to do is add a link to destroy this. So right, so I'm going to say, let's see. Actually, let's make a checkbox, right? So we create a label. And then say, call toggle done, and I'll create an input, type checkbox. Let's see, let's make it read only, maybe its value checked is equal to do dot, what was the attribute, was it done? Done, cool. And then on click, I want to update that attribute, right, to the opposite of whatever it is. Like any old toggle. So what I'm going to do is go to do update attribute, and then pass in done is the opposite of whatever it is, which would be to do done. Let's see if that works. Actually, I better prevent the default action from happening there so we can make sure it only updates if it's actually done. Have I lost anybody? Is everyone with me still? Oh, here we go. Yeah, we gotta put this inside of a div. A JSON That was to test you guys, see if you guys paid attention, and you all failed. But I'm willing to forgive it for the purpose of instruction. Okay. Make sure you get feedback to this guy. This is all like React 101 type stuff. Cool, so now we have this label that is, it allows toggle done. So as you can see, when I toggle it, done is toggling from true to false, and then we also have an updated add, so this is fully getting to Rails and it's talking to our API. You take a look at the Redux actions in here. We have update to do, okay, update to do. We never have to write these, we shouldn't have to write actions, we shouldn't have to write users. And that's the whole deal here, is that ReactiveRecord is taking care of all this for us, and we have a very declarative syntax, it's easy to understand, easy to read. This will take developers a good 10 minutes to figure out how to use, and that was the whole goal, is that we use minimal props, minimal syntax, and that it just works, and that's the way it should have worked from the beginning. So that is essentially ReactiveRecord. Our custom build of ReactiveRecord kind of uses a bunch of we tap into Rails and we pull in validations to where our models, we want to be in a situation where if we define a validation in the backend in our models, we want that to automatically be populated with no more coding on our part inside of React. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to open up in.yaml. And just to kind of demonstrate the new form, if I try to save this, ReactiveRecord will put a stop to it and say name is required. That's kind of like a default error from Rails that's pulling from, so it actually populates the validations automatically. And I'm going to add my own error message in here and say, this is, if you've used Rails before, this is basically what you have to do, and say if the name is blank, what no name, and I'm going to regenerate this file here to validate the models. Make sure that goes well. Okay, cool. So no more coding on our part. I just changed the error message in a YAML file inside of Rails. So I'm going to refresh the page, and if I try to save it again, that error is fully populated inside of React, and we're coding on our part, which is a phenomenal thing. So that's just another example of what we're able to accomplish with ReactiveRecord with minimal syntax. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Okay, cool. Wow, we're doing awesome on time, so we're not out of time yet. So I want to talk quickly about the results that we experienced with this. One of the obvious results is that in order to build, and just like you guys, if you're building a single-page application, you probably have a feature-proof JSON API. ReactiveRecord, and just using React in general, allows us to make a fully feature-proof JSON API, which is awesome, because that frees us to do what? Create more strategies for our backend, for our service. So we're not building a website anymore, we now have a service that we can build an iOS app from, we can build a point-of-sale device from, we can help analytics out more. So it's a good thing. Forced adoption of great UX practices, the things like that you get with ReactiveRecord free you up from having to build the boilerplate bullshit code that you get with UX. We learned to code for developer friendliness. That syntax that I showed you with the collection and member is something that we made before we even wrote ReactiveRecord. We were like, wouldn't it be cool if we could write it like this? And then we coded it to work like that. So that was a really cool thing that I've personally done before. It's kind of like when you're building something, it's important to try to build it how you want to use it first, and then make it so. So we coded for developer friendliness. And our new devs onboarded quickly. It took all of our devs who use this now less than a day to have learned ReactiveRecord in its entirety. And they no longer have to write mapStateToProps, map dispatch-to-props, and stuff like that. It's going to be a lost art of the React community. It's going to be a really sad thing to see it go. It's kind of like when printers came out. Like before printers came out, everyone had to learn how to write PostScript files, right? And now that printers came out with Microsoft Office, no one even knows what a PostScript file is. So it's kind of the same deal. What's next? I want you guys to try ReactiveRecord. So it's available via npm yarn out of ReactiveRecord, or what's the npm command? I'm going to use it anyway. Yeah, yarn. I mean, whatever. And then import ReactiveRecord and start using it. This is a public repo. If you look for this, you'll see that it belongs to Rentolution. It's now Avail. We're going to change our GitHub code name. But I really hope that you guys try to use it and then contact me because we're looking for people to contribute to this project. We're also looking for people to help us to complete the documentation to complete a 1.0 release. So if you are interested in that, please get in contact with me because we'd be happy to talk to you for one, because it's a small world. And two, we're looking to make a 1.0 release so people can actually trust in the works that you guys have seen today. So, and that is reactive record. Do you guys have any questions? Awesome. All right, cool.
So is it specifically designed for a Rails backend?
That's a great question. And no, it isn't. As long as your API backend is RESTful, it's going to work. I've actually built a backend. It's kind of backend agnostic. I built a backend with reactive record to work with Firebase. Anybody Firebase? So I built one to work with Firebase that works awesome because it's real time. So that not only you don't have to submit post requests to get new data or refresh data. Firebase will pick it up to date on its own. So no, there are several backends for it, but as long as your API is RESTful, it'll plug into it. So as long, go ahead.
I noticed that the created and updated app were camel case on your backend with a snake case and then converted it, or?
Great question. So it doesn't matter. Reactive Record will respond to both, and will only shit out. Sorry. It will let you just create it at camel case. It's JS, so everything's camel case. So whether your backend has created at underscore or created at camel case, it'll. I don't even know if it's a synonym for that word. It's execute camel case. Any questions? Go ahead.
You basically recreated Rails and ActiveRecord JavaScript. Why bother?
Why bother? Well, because there was no solution. There was no connection between Rails and React, and we were excited about using React, and there was really no other solution. It just didn't exist. If you are a Rails person and you started using React, what are your options? You have React on Rails, you have React Rails, you have Webpacker, you have these different tools, but they don't do the last step, which is what you actually want, which is to get help get your data inside your application. So it was basically the only solution. Do you have an extra question?
I did. And it slipped my mind because when it'll come back.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you handle any other sort of non-RESTful verbs that we could connect to website? Can it handle any push functionality?
Not out of the box. So there are more RESTful verbs, right? There's options, there's head. The fetch library that's I guess Reactive Record also assumes that you use fetch. So you have to, if you were going to start using Reactive Record, you have to install fetch as a dependency. But fetch kind of does that for you. And you can create, aside from the schema syntax, there's also a route syntax that lets you define what actual route is every single action is mapped to. It just assumes that you have a create route, you have an index route, you have an update route, and a show route, and stuff like that. And as long as you have those things, you can override those to wherever you need to be. You can pass them on to others. Go ahead.
I'm trying to piece together where you sort of do the lines to end what reactive record is, because you've got form stuff in there. You know, like I'm like, because my mind is going to active record and trying to think of what that does, and think, okay, you've implemented that, but it seems like you've probably implemented more on top of that because you've got controllers stuff going on to some degree. Am I wrong?
No, you're totally right, and it's true. Reactive Record cuts off at the model level, or Active Record cuts off at the model level. Then you have tools like Active Support, Action Controller, all those other things that are built into Rails, form helpers and stuff like that. But for us, one of our requirements, one of the things I was talking about earlier, is that we wanted the ability for there to be first-class citizens inside the website, making the form components. So those are essentially helpers that wrap the entire Reactive Record, which is all on its own, just the ability to say update attributes and save. And so all the form component does is it takes all the refs from the form inputs and it applies them to the object itself and it says save on that object. And that will result in either a put request or a push request depending on if the object exists or not.
Then the whole fat model, skinny controller thing, where do you put that fat model logic?
So there's not really a concept of controllers in your front end.
Yeah.
There can be, I guess, if you're like creative enough to do that. But really, it's just a top-level folder called models, and then you have to import those before you actually instantiate your reducer. And that kind of like how you init reactive record, how you start using it, is in the README of the repo. And like it's kind of, I try to make it intuitive, but then again, like I said, this is like heavily needed documentation. The README will help you get started though. Like I've actually queried structured files where you put stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, can one model pull from two separate APIs? you pretty much have to tie your API directly to what your models to be.
Yeah, so something I didn't, that's a great question. Something I didn't show you guys is that there's, at the beginning of when I create the React app and instantiated it, there's a method that I use called setAPIPrefix, and that like it kind of assumes that you, let's see here. So I call this method here called setAPI and prefixes /API. That can really be anything. On the model level, you can override any route, any create, index, update, delete route to be, whatever you need it to be. So it doesn't matter if you're using multiple APIs in your application or just one. It kind of just lets you define it at the model level. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
For your validation that you got out of the Rails YAML file,
Yes.
is that something that you're just generating like a JavaScript file that's getting loaded in somewhere?
Yeah, so it actually uses a library that we use at Avail called client-side validations, which just it takes your validations object that's generated natively from your Rails models, and it exports it as a JSON object.
Okay. So if you're not using Rails, you have to implement it yourself?
Well, no, it's just one file, and that's in the repo too. It's just like, it's kind of like you just like have to export it. But yeah, there is an entire syntax for how to actually use the validations. So you don't have to have Rails to get the validations, you just have to write it yourself. Any other questions? Good.
Yeah, does it handle a lot of scenarios like, multiple to-dos per user, weird joint relationships and stuff like that? Or is that all before it gets to the layer?
Well, so that's a great question about application design, I'd say. Because this kind of assumes that whatever you return from the API or from your API is just going to show that. Right? So you wouldn't want to have an endpoint that returns every to-do from every user. You probably want to scope it into the current user, identified by their cookie in their session. On the other hand, it will basically return whatever is returned from the API. But it will instantiate it first as a ReactiveRecord model. Does that answer your question?
Well, what if there is a case where, say, you're managing like all the to-dos for, a certain group of users?
One more thing. I know we're probably running out of time. Sorry about that. So when you're rendering a collection, you also get a where prop, and you can pass in stuff like where user ID is 3 or whatever it happens to be, and it will filter those results by that, whatever you happen to pass in there, whatever dynamic attribute is in there.
Could it be an array of IDs?
It can be an array of IDs. You should know that, Patrick.
Leading question.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time. And I think I've gone over, so I apologize about that. But yeah, that's ReactiveRecord. I hope you guys will contact us and we'll talk.